You may think Wild West cowboys were a little rough around the edges, but do you know just how filthy they really were? Cowboys went 6 months without bathing, used gunpowder as toothpaste, and shared razors with 15 other men. While you complain about your shower being too cold, these legendary American heroes lived in conditions so filthy they'd be considered biological hazards today. Today, we're counting down the 12 most disgusting hygiene practices that made Wild West cowboys walking health disasters. Number 12, bathing practices, the monthly miracle. For a Wild West cowboy, a bath wasn't a daily ritual. It was a monthly miracle if they were lucky. Most cowboys went 3 to 6 months without what we'd consider a proper bath. When they finally did bathe, it was usually in whatever water source they could find, a creek, a river, or if they were really fortunate, a stock tank. Here's where it gets interesting and disgusting. Cowboys on cattle drives developed a bathing hierarchy based on seniority and rank. The trail boss bathed first in the cleanest water, followed by the segundo, then the regular hands, and finally, the cook and wrangler. By the time the last cowboy got his turn, the water was so murky and filthy that it was barely recognizable as water. But here's the kicker. They often didn't even use soap. Real soap was expensive and hard to come by on the trail. Instead, they used whatever they could find. Sand to scrub off the worst grime, or if they were lucky, lye soap made from animal fat and wood ash. This homemade soap was so harsh, it could literally burn your skin if you weren't careful. When cowboys finally made it to towns like Dodge City, they'd line up for hours at bathhouses, paying $8 in today's money for a hot bath. But even then, multiple cowboys would use the same bath water before it was changed. Number 11, the shared razor nightmare. If you think sharing a toothbrush is gross, wait until you hear about cowboy shaving practices. Most cowboys owned exactly one razor if they owned one at all. On cattle drives and in remote camps, that single razor would be shared among the entire crew. We're talking about 10 to 15 men using the same blade, often without any cleaning between uses. The shaving ritual usually happened once a week if they were lucky, more often once a month. Cowboys would gather around a single mirror, usually a piece of polished metal, and take turns scraping their faces with the communal razor. There was no shaving cream, so they used whatever was available. Soap, if they had it, animal fat, or sometimes just water. Here's where it gets truly horrifying. They rarely cleaned the razor between users. Blood, whiskers, and skin would accumulate on the blade as it passed from cowboy to cowboy. Infections were common, and many cowboys developed permanent scars from infected razor cuts. Some cowboys solved this problem by simply not shaving at all. Photographs from the era show that full beards were incredibly common, not because they were fashionable, but because shaving was such an ordeal. Number 10, clothes that never came off. Here's something that'll make your skin crawl. Many cowboys wore the same clothes for months without ever taking them off, even to sleep. A typical cowboy owned exactly one set of work clothes: a pair of pants, a shirt, long underwear, and maybe a vest. That was it. These clothes stayed on their bodies 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for months at a time. They slept in them, worked in them, ate in them, and yes, relieved themselves in them. The long underwear, called union suits, were particularly notorious. Cowboys would put on their union suits at the beginning of winter and not remove them until spring. By the end of the season, these garments were so stiff with accumulated sweat, dirt, and bodily fluids that they could literally stand up on their own. When clothes finally wore out completely, cowboys would sometimes just put new clothes on over the old ones rather than go through the ordeal of undressing. The smell was indescribable. Cowboys who worked around cattle all day would absorb the odors of manure, sweat, leather, and tobacco smoke into their clothes. After months without washing, these garments became biological hazards. Number 9, the communal toothbrush horror. Dental hygiene among cowboys was practically non-existent, but when they did attempt to clean their teeth, the methods were shocking. Most cowboys didn't own toothbrushes. They were expensive and considered a luxury item. Instead, they used whatever was available, twigs, pieces of cloth, or their own fingers. But here's the truly disgusting part. When a cowboy crew did manage to acquire a toothbrush, they all shared it. One toothbrush would serve an entire outfit of 10 to 15 men. They'd pass it around like a peace pipe, each man taking his turn scrubbing his teeth with the same brush that had just been in another man's mouth. There was no concept of individual ownership when it came to personal hygiene items. Instead of toothpaste, cowboys used whatever abrasive material they could find. Salt was the preferred option when available, but many used baking soda, charcoal, or even gunpowder. Yes, gunpowder. The same explosive material they used in their firearms was considered an acceptable tooth cleaner. Some cowboys developed their own tooth cleaning concoctions. A mixture of whiskey and salt was popular, not just for cleaning, but because the alcohol provided some pain relief for the constant toothaches that plagued frontier life. Others used chewing tobacco as a form of dental care, believing that tobacco juice would kill bacteria in their mouths. The results were predictably horrific. Most cowboys over the age of 30 had lost several teeth, and those that remained were usually black, broken, or rotting. Dental abscesses were common and often fatal, as there were no dentists on the frontier to treat serious infections. Number 8, hair care that would horrify a barber. Cowboy hair care practices were so primitive, they'd make a caveman cringe. Most cowboys cut their own hair using whatever sharp instrument was available, usually a knife or scissors if they were lucky. The results were predictably awful. Uneven, choppy haircuts were the norm, and many cowboys simply let their hair grow wild rather than attempt to trim it themselves. But cutting hair was the least of their problems. Washing hair required precious water and soap, both of which were in short supply on the trail. Cowboys would go months without washing their hair, allowing grease, dirt, and sweat to build up until their hair became matted and stiff. Lice were a constant companion. Every cowboy had them, and they accepted lice infestations as a normal part of life. The itching was so constant that scratching became an unconscious habit. Cowboys would sit around campfires in the evening, picking lice out of each other's hair like a troop of monkeys. Some cowboys tried to combat lice using kerosene or coal oil, pouring these toxic substances directly onto their scalps. This sometimes killed the lice, but it also frequently caused chemical burns and hair loss. The cure was often worse than the problem. Number 7, the Spit Cup Society. Spitting was not just common among cowboys, it was practically a competitive sport, and the hygiene implications were revolting. Nearly every cowboy chewed tobacco, and with that came the constant need to spit. But on the trail, there were no spittoons, so cowboys spit wherever they pleased. Around campfires, the ground would be saturated with tobacco juice, creating a disgusting brown mud that stuck to everything. In bunkhouses and saloons, the situation was even worse. Spittoons were provided, but they were rarely emptied and never cleaned. The brass spittoons would overflow with a mixture of tobacco juice, saliva, and whatever else cowboys decided to spit into them. The smell was overwhelming, and the sight was enough to turn the strongest stomach. But here's what made it truly horrifying. Cowboys would often miss the spittoons entirely. Floors in frontier establishments were stained brown with tobacco juice, and walking across them meant stepping in other men's spit with every step. Some cowboys developed the habit of spitting into their own hats when spittoons weren't available, then emptying the hats later. Others would spit into tin cups or bottles, carrying their accumulated spit with them throughout the day. The thought of accidentally drinking from the wrong cup was a constant fear. Number 6. Dirty streets that bred disease. The streets of frontier cattle towns weren't just paths. They were biological hazards that would make a modern health inspector faint. Picture this. You're walking down the main street of Dodge City in 1875. With every step, your boots sink into a thick, squishy mixture of horse manure, cattle droppings, human waste, and rotting garbage. The street is actually a layer of accumulated filth that's been building up for months, sometimes years, without any organized cleanup. But here's what made cowboy towns uniquely disgusting. They were designed around moving massive herds of cattle through the center of town. Thousands of longhorns would be driven right down Main Street, leaving behind a trail of manure that could be several inches deep. A single cow produces about 65 pounds of waste per day. So imagine 3,000 head of cattle spending even one night in town. Cowboys themselves added to the problem in ways that would shock you. After months on the trail without proper facilities, they'd relieve themselves wherever convenient, often right in the street. The smell was legendary. Visitors to cattle towns wrote about being able to smell them from 10 miles away on a hot day. The combination of rotting manure, human waste, dead animals, and garbage created a stench so powerful it would make grown men vomit. The streets became breeding grounds for every disease imaginable. Cholera outbreaks would sweep through cattle towns, killing dozens in a matter of days. Number 5. No toilet paper, the wiping nightmare. In an era before toilet paper, cowboys had to get creative with personal hygiene, and the results were absolutely horrifying. Corn cobs were considered the luxury option when available. After eating corn, cowboys would save the cobs and use them for cleaning themselves. While this might sound primitive, corn cobs were actually relatively effective and were reusable after cleaning. Some cowboys would carry their personal corn cob with them, using it until it literally fell apart. But corn cobs weren't always available, especially during winter or in areas where corn wasn't grown. Cowboys had to use whatever they could find: leaves, grass, smooth stones, or pieces of cloth torn from their already limited clothing. The choice of leaves was critical. Poison ivy was a constant threat, and many cowboys learned the hard way which plants to avoid. In winter, when vegetation was scarce and frozen, cowboys would use snow to clean themselves. This led to frostbite and other cold-related injuries in sensitive areas. Some resorted to using sticks, small stones, or even their own hands, then cleaning them as best they could with whatever water was available. The lack of proper cleaning materials led to constant health problems. Infections, rashes, and other hygiene-related issues were common. Cowboys would develop sores and irritation that would become infected, sometimes leading to serious medical complications. Number 4, water that would kill you today. The water situation for cowboys was so dangerous that drinking it was literally a life or death gamble every single day. Cowboys on cattle drives drank from the same water sources as their cattle, rivers, streams, and stock tanks that were contaminated with animal waste, dead animals, and runoff from settlements upstream. This water was often brown, smelly, and filled with visible debris, but it was all they had. Alkali water was a constant threat in many parts of the West. This water, heavy with minerals and salts, would cause severe diarrhea and dehydration. Cowboys called it gyp water, and drinking too much of it could be fatal. But when it was the only water available, they had no choice but to drink it and suffer the consequences. Stagnant water in stock tanks was breeding grounds for bacteria and parasites. Cowboys would often find dead animals floating in their water supply, but they'd simply remove the carcass and continue drinking from the same source. Boiling water to purify it was rarely practical on the trail, as it required precious fuel and time. Coffee was often safer to drink than plain water because the boiling process killed some bacteria. But cowboys would reuse the same coffee grounds for days, creating a bitter, contaminated brew that was barely recognizable as coffee. They called it six-shooter coffee because it was strong enough to float a pistol. Number 3, sleeping arrangements that bred disease. The sleeping conditions for cowboys were so unsanitary, they created perfect breeding grounds for disease and parasites. Most cowboys slept on the ground with nothing but a thin bedroll between them and the dirt. These bedrolls, called sugans, were rarely washed and became saturated with sweat, dirt, and bodily fluids over months of use. The wool or canvas material would become so stiff and filthy that it provided little comfort or warmth. Bed bugs were a constant companion. Every bedroll was infested with them, and cowboys accepted the nightly torture of being bitten dozens of times as a normal part of life. The bugs would hide in the seams of the bedding during the day and emerge at night to feed, leaving cowboys covered in itchy, infected bites. In bunkhouses, the situation was even worse. Multiple cowboys would share beds, spreading lice, fleas, and diseases between them. The mattresses, when they existed, were usually stuffed with straw that was never changed. This straw would rot and become home to rats, mice, and countless insects. Number 2, the shared eating utensils. Nightmare. Mealtime hygiene among cowboys was a disaster that would violate every food safety regulation ever written. Most cowboy outfits shared a common set of eating utensils, a few tin plates, cups, and spoons that were used by the entire crew. These utensils were rarely washed properly, usually just wiped clean with a dirty rag or rinsed in whatever water was available. The same plate that one cowboy used for breakfast would be used by another for lunch, often without any cleaning in between. The chuck wagon cook, despite being responsible for feeding the crew, often had the worst hygiene of anyone in the outfit. Cooks would prepare food with unwashed hands, use the same knife to cut meat and vegetables without cleaning it, and serve meals from pots that hadn't been properly cleaned in weeks. Cowboys ate with their hands more often than with utensils, and hand washing before meals was virtually non-existent. The same hands that had been handling cattle, rope, and manure all day would go directly into the food. Dysentery and food poisoning were constant threats on cattle drives. Coffee cups were particularly disgusting. Cowboys would drink coffee from tin cups that were never washed, just rinsed with hot coffee. The cups would develop a thick black coating inside that was considered seasoning. Some cowboys claimed their coffee cups made better coffee because of this accumulated residue, but it was actually a breeding ground for bacteria. The famous son of a bitch stew that was a staple of cowboy cuisine was often prepared in conditions that would horrify modern health inspectors. Organ meats from freshly slaughtered cattle would be thrown into a pot with whatever vegetables were available, cooked over an open fire, and served from the same pot for days until it was gone. Food storage was another nightmare. Meat would be hung from the chuck wagon to dry, attracting flies and other insects. Flour and other dry goods were stored in sacks that were often contaminated with rodent droppings. Cowboys would pick the obvious contamination out of their food and eat the rest without concern. Number 1, the whiskey medicine cabinet. Cowboys used whiskey as a cure-all for every medical and hygiene problem they encountered, creating a dangerous cycle of alcohol dependency disguised as healthcare. Whiskey was the universal antiseptic on the frontier. Cowboys would pour it on wounds, use it to sterilize crude surgical instruments, and drink it to numb pain from injuries and dental problems. While alcohol does have some antiseptic properties, the whiskey available to cowboys was often contaminated and sometimes did more harm than good. For dental care, cowboys would soak cotton or cloth in whiskey and pack it around infected teeth. They believed this would kill bacteria and reduce pain, and while it may have provided temporary relief, it often led to worse infections and alcohol poisoning from the whiskey being absorbed through the gums. Stomach problems, which were common due to poor food and water quality, were treated with whiskey. Cowboys believed that alcohol would kill harmful bacteria in their digestive systems, and they would drink large quantities of whiskey to treat dysentery and other intestinal ailments. This often made the problems worse and led to dehydration. Whiskey was used as a sleep aid for cowboys suffering from the constant pain of injuries, infections, and parasites. Many cowboys became dependent on alcohol just to get through the night, leading to a cycle of addiction that was common on the frontier. External injuries were treated by pouring whiskey directly on wounds, regardless of how deep or serious they were. While this may have killed some bacteria, it also caused severe pain and tissue damage. Cowboys would often pass out from the pain of having whiskey poured on serious injuries. These 15 shocking hygiene practices of Wild West cowboys reveal a reality far different from the romanticized image Hollywood has given us. These men weren't just rugged and independent, they were living in conditions so unsanitary that they would be considered health hazards by any modern standard. Yet somehow, they survived and even thrived in this harsh environment, building the foundation for the American West we know today. Their sacrifices and hardships, including the daily battle against dirt, disease, and discomfort, helped shape a nation. The next time you complain about your morning shower being too cold or running out of your favorite soap, remember the cowboys who considered a monthly bath in shared dirty water to be the height of luxury. What do you think about these shocking cowboy hygiene practices? Could you survive even a week living like a Wild West cowboy? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more eye-opening looks at how our ancestors really lived